Welcome to this episode. Have you subscribed yet? The Mystery of the Mountain Ghost's Marriage in Ghost Opera in Yinshan, Records of the Nuo Mask and the Sunken Coffin. Chapter 16, The Rising Empty Coffin Group from the River Bottom. The Dragon Boat Festival in Yinshan Village always carried an indescribable dampness. The moss on the stone-paved road glowed eerily before dawn. Su Wanyan stood by the Yinshui River, looking at the faintly floating coffin outlines under the water. Since the mystery of the mountain ghost's marriage, the 19 stone coffins at the bottom of the river had gradually emerged from the water within 3 days. The newly engraved birth dates on the coffin lids were like red paper soaked in blood, particularly dazzling in the morning mist. "Brother Wanyan," Lin Yunyang's voice came from the direction of the infirmary with an unusual tremor. When Su Wanyan turned around, he happened to see her staggering out, pushing open the wooden door. The hem of her white coat was stained with the red sand from the bottom of the river, and the coffin-shaped birthmark on the back of her neck glowed faintly in the morning mist. He remembered hearing the sound of a carving knife hitting pagoda wood when he passed by the infirmary last night. Now, as he got closer, he found blood seeping from her fingertips, and in her palm, she was still holding half of a newly carved eye socket of a Nuo Opera mask. "Yunyang, your hand." Su Wanyan tried to grab her wrist, but she suddenly dodged. Lin Yunyang's gaze was fixed on the river surface, and the slowly rising coffin group was reflected in her pupils. Broken syllables spilled from her throat. "They're waiting for you. The 20th stone coffin is in the middle of the riverbed." The water of the Yinshui River had somehow become crystal clear. The 19 stone coffins stood upright in the shallows like tombstones, with the coffin lids propped up at a 45-degree angle, revealing the empty darkness inside. And the 20th stone coffin in the center was slowly rising from the bottom of the river at this moment. The three characters Su Wanyan were engraved on the coffin lid with the river god incantations, and each stroke caused ripples on the water surface. Su Wanyan suddenly noticed that red ropes were wrapped around the edges of each coffin lid, and the knot style was exactly the same as that when his mother was laid in the coffin in 1937. 3 days ago, when you were in a coma, the coffin group arranged themselves into this formation. Lin Yunyang suddenly grabbed his wrist, her fingernails almost digging into his ligneous birthmark. "They're imitating the human face pattern of the mountain god pagoda tree, and the one in the middle ... double quotes." Her voice stopped abruptly. Su Wanyan followed her gaze and saw that on the inner side of the coffin lid of the 20th stone coffin, a huddled figure had somehow emerged, covering its eyes with both hands, exactly the scene of Nuwa's broken knife on the mural of the mountain god pagoda tree. Su Wanyan suddenly pulled his hand back and staggered back to the old pagoda tree by the riverbank. The human face on the tree bark was facing the river surface at this moment, and the arc of the cracked mouth was exactly the same as the arrangement of the coffin group. The tree sap dripped along the crack, forming the shape of 20 on the ground. He remembered the drum score that Chun Chiazi had stuffed into his hand before his death. The four characters Twin Fiends can substitute at the missing corner of page 19 suddenly overlapped with the coffin formation in front of him. Could it be that the so-called Twin Fiends meant to seal his and Lin Yunyang's souls into the 19th and 20th stone coffins respectively? "Wanyan, look at this!" Lin Yunyang had somehow squatted by the riverbank, holding a pagoda wood tablet picked up from the bottom of the river in her hand. The birth dates of the whole village on the back of the tablet were fading, but only his and Lin Yunyang's names were particularly clear. Between the two names, the newly engraved symbol was like overlapping coffins, or like two finger bones of the Thousand Ants. Even more eerily, water droplets seeped from the edge of the tablet, reflecting 19 masked figures on the ground, each shadow imitating his movements. "Last night, I heard the sound of engraving at the bottom of the river." Lin Yunyang's fingertips traced the bottom of the tablet, where a line of small characters had somehow appeared. On the winter solstice in 1937, when Sister Chunyang engraved the Twin Fiends' birthmark inside the stone coffin, the sound of the blood flowing into the river, God's vein was exactly the same as your heartbeat now. She looked up at him, with the approaching coffins reflected in her eyes. "Do you remember when you were 10 years old, you said you dreamed of lying at the bottom of the river, and my name was engraved on the inner side of the coffin lid?" Su Wanyan suddenly felt a dizzy spell, with his temples throbbing. The blood-colored flocculent pattern in his left eye almost blocked his vision. He saw countless memory fragments floating in the river water. His mother Su Xunyang's silver bracelet shining inside the stone coffin. The birthmark on the back of Lin Yunyang's neck, coinciding with the pattern of the river god Stele. And what Chun Xiazi had said before his death, the soul-summoning paper figures of Luo men can only last for 30 years. These fragments suddenly gathered together, forming the words "return to the position" on the water surface. At this time, the 20th stone coffin had drifted to his feet, and the coffin lid clicked and cracked open a slit. "Don't touch it." Lin Yunyang suddenly shrieked and pounced on him, the carving knife in her hand cutting through his sleeve. Su Wanyan looked down and saw that incantations identical to those on the stone coffin had somehow emerged on the inner side of his wrist, and Lin Yunyang's fingertips were pressing on the center of the incantations, where a drop of blood mixed with pagoda tree sawdust was seeping out. "3 days ago, when you had a fever, I saw this in your dream." Lin Yunyang's voice was tinged with sobs, and the carving knife clattered to the ground. The inner side of the stone coffin is engraved with every birthday of yours from childhood to adulthood. The latest stroke is the score of the coffin, sinking song you drew in the paper, making shop last week. Wanyan, these stone coffins are not sacrifices at all, but soul registers for recording the twin fiends. Suddenly, 19 dull sounds came from the bottom of the river. The 19 stone coffins simultaneously turned towards the center, and the reflections of Su Wanyan slowly emerged from the eye sockets of the Nuo Opera masks on the inner side of the coffin lids. He suddenly remembered the replaced old photo in the ancestral hall genealogy. Himself, in a red wedding dress, wearing his mother's silver bracelet on the chest, and on the back of the photo was clearly stamped with the mark of Luo men, a severed thousand hand. "Yunyang, the birthmark on the back of your neck, ... double quotes." Su Wanyan suddenly froze. The coffin-shaped birthmark on the back of Lin Yunyang's neck was supposed to be there, but at this moment, it was absorbing the red light from the river surface and turning into the same blood-colored pattern as the thousand-hand corpse god. Even more terrifyingly, her pupils were splitting. The left eye reflected the coffin group at the bottom of the river, and the right eye reflected the human face pattern of the mountain god pagoda tree, a sign of the awakening of the twin fiends' bloodline. "Last night, I walked to the river. Lin Yunyang touched the back of her neck, her fingertips touching the raised incantations. I carved Nuo Nasomite long, and each eye socket had the same curvature as the corner of your eye. When the first ray of sunlight shone on the mask, I heard the river god's vein say." She suddenly grabbed Su Wanyan's hand and pressed it against her chest. "It said that the blood of the twin fiends must flow into the same stone coffin. Otherwise, the left hand of the thousand hands will completely wake up." Su Wanyan's fingertips touched the scar on her chest, the fatal injury that his mother had blocked for her when she was laid in the coffin in 1993. At this moment, the scar was getting hot as the stone coffin approached, and the words, "2023 Dragon Boat Festival," emerged in the morning mist, exactly the day of the river god's sacrifice. He suddenly remembered the drum score left by Chun Xiazi. The twin fiend symbol on the last page was not overlapping coffins, but 2 clasped hands, one ligneous and the other scaly. "Look." Lin Yunyang suddenly pointed at the river surface. The coffin lid of the 20th stone coffin had somehow completely opened. Inside there was red silk embroidered with the thousand hands pattern. In the center of the silk cloth, half of a Nuo opera mask was lying quietly, exactly the half that his mother Su Xunyang wore when she was laid in the coffin. The human tooth in the eye socket glowed faintly in the morning dew, and on the inner side of the stone coffin, newly engraved incantations were oozing blood. On the day when the twin fiends return to their positions, the river god's vein will stop flowing. Su Wanyan suddenly noticed that small dates were engraved on the edges of all the coffin lids from 1937 to 2023, with a scale every 10 years. When his gaze fell on the 2023 scale, the coffin group suddenly emitted a resonant hum. 19 blood-colored light columns rose from the water surface, stretching his and Lin Yunyang's shadows into the shape of 1,000 hands. This is the 5-finger formation of the 1,000 hands. Lin Yunyang suddenly calmed down and took out a blood-stained notebook from the pocket of her white coat. "I found this in the infirmary last night. Each stone coffin corresponds to a finger of the 1,000 hands, and the 20th one in the center, ... She opened the notebook, which was filled with patterns of coffin arrangements. The central position was marked, "Heart, Twin Fiends, is used to hold our symbiotic soul." Su Wanyan took the notebook and found that half of a yellowed theater ticket was pasted on the last page. The seat number was exactly the 19th stone coffin at the bottom of the river, and the signature of the ticket inspector was Qing Qiazi, and a date, the Dragon Boat Festival in 1937, exactly the day when Lin Yunyang should have been laid in the coffin. He suddenly remembered what Chen Xiaozi had said about the soul summoning paper figures of Luo Men. Could it be that since then, the Tomb Keeper had been laying out a plan, making the Twin Fiends the key to preventing the resurrection of the 1,000 Hands? "Wang Yin, look at the water." Lin Yunyang suddenly pointed at the river surface. Su Wanyan looked over and saw that the reflections of the 19 stone coffins in the water formed the shape of the mountain god pagoda tree, and the reflection of the 20th stone coffin was exactly the bleeding human face on the tree trunk. Even more eerily, in the eye socket of each coffin lid mask, his face was reflected, but it was constantly splitting, turning into 19 different aged versions of himself, each wearing a Nuo opera mask with a different number. "They're waiting for me to lie in," Su Wanyan suddenly said, his voice colder than the river water. He remembered what his mother had written in her diary. "The blood of the Twin Fiends is the key to open the 1,000 Hands, and also the only blade that can destroy it." At this moment, his left ring finger was becoming ligneous, gradually merging with the pagoda wood texture on the edge of the stone coffin. And on the back of Lin Yunyang's neck, scales were growing along the birthmark, refracting the faint light of the river, God's vein in the morning mist. Lin Yunyang suddenly grabbed his wrist and forcefully put the silver bracelet on his hand. "When Mother replaced me and was laid in the coffin in 1937, the words Twin Fiends, One Soul were engraved on the inner side of the silver bracelet. Later, Lin Wanchen scraped them off. Her fingertips traced the inner circle of the bracelet, where new engravings had somehow emerged. Destroy the eyes, break the 1,000 hands, sacrifice oneself, suppress Yinshen. The water of the Yinshui River suddenly flowed backwards, and the coffin group began to rotate clockwise, forming a huge whirlpool. Su Wanyan felt a force dragging him towards the center. The red silk in the 20th stone coffin was moving without wind, and the incantations on the inner side of the coffin lid glowed faintly, clearly reflecting his reflection. The birthmark on his left ring finger coincided with the pattern in the coffin, and the image of the 19 stone coffins opening simultaneous eyes. Yunyang, do you remember the wish we made under the mountain god pagoda tree when we were kids? Su Wanyan suddenly smiled. His laughter mixed with the roar of the river. You said you wanted to be the first doctor in Yinshan village to go to college, and I said I wanted to write the story of the coffin sinking into a novel. He looked down at the silver bracelet, and the 37 to 2023 on the inner circle was dripping blood. It turns out that since we were born, we were destined to become the sacrifice of this stone coffin. Lin Yunyang's tears fell on the red silk and were instantly absorbed without a trace. No, Mother engraved at the bottom of the river that the twin fiends are not sacrifices, but ... double quotes. Her words were interrupted by the friction sound of the coffin lid. The coffin lid of the 20th stone coffin was closing automatically, and the position exposed in the center of the red silk was just big enough for a person to lie down. Su Wanyan took one last look at the mountain god pagoda tree by the riverbank. The human face pattern on the tree bark actually showed a smile at this moment. The tree sap dripped along the eyes, forming the words "return to the position" on the ground. He suddenly understood that all the sacrifices, curses, and memories were part of the revival of the 1,000-hand corpse god, and the existence of the twin fiends was never to break the curse, but to complete the final sacrifice. "Wait for me to come back," he said to Lin Yunyang, while pressing the half-mask against the edge of the stone coffin. The broken edge of the Nuo opera mask resonated with the coffin wood. A virtual image of Nuwa suddenly emerged on the river surface, holding a broken knife in her hand, which was composed of two halves of the mask. Before the coffin lid completely closed, he saw the scales on the back of Lin Yunyang's neck suddenly fall off and turn into river lanterns flowing downstream. On the lamp surface was written, "The corpse driving people in Qian region are waiting for the blood of the twin fiends." The moment darkness enveloped him, Su Wanyan heard 19 bell tolls from the bottom of the river, exactly the same as the Nuo opera drumbeat. He knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of the next sacrifice. When the blood of the twin fiends dripped into the stone coffin, the left hand of the thousand-hand corpse god was slowly opening its 5 fingers at the root of the mountain god pagoda tree. The end of this episode. The story continues. Subscribe now.